Ma'am, this area is not for people like you. The words landed harder than Officer Ethan Carter intended, not because he shouted them, but because he said them with the casual certainty of a man who believed he already knew the entire story. The train station bustled with late-afternoon travelers moving beneath high glass ceilings streaked with golden sunlight. Rolling suitcases rattled across polished floors. Digital boards flickered with departure times. Families hurried toward platforms while business travelers stared at their phones. In the middle of it all stood a black woman in a neatly pressed military uniform, one hand resting on the handle of a dark duffel bag. She looked up at Ethan calmly. Her expression did not change. She did not argue. She did not seem offended. If anything, she looked slightly tired. "Excuse me," she asked. Ethan folded his arms. "This section is restricted. Authorized personnel only." The woman glanced at the sign mounted above the hallway entrance. Then she looked back at him. "I am aware." Her voice was steady and professional. That somehow irritated Ethan more than it should have. He had spent most of the day dealing with complaints, confused travelers, and security concerns related to an upcoming military ceremony being held nearby. Important guests were expected to arrive. High-ranking officers were scheduled to pass through the station. Security had been tightened all week. And now, standing near one of the restricted access corridors, was a woman he did not recognize wearing a uniform he immediately assumed did not belong there. "Identification," he said. Around them, several travelers slowed their pace. Curiosity spread quickly in public places. The woman reached calmly into her pocket and produced identification without complaint. Ethan examined it. Ava Brooks. The name meant nothing to him. He looked from the card back to her face. She appeared to be in her late 40s. Her uniform was immaculate but not flashy. No dramatic display of rank. No attempt to draw attention. Just quiet professionalism. Ethan handed the card back. "Where are you headed?" Ava adjusted the strap of her duffel bag. "Platform 8. For what purpose?" For the first time, she seemed mildly surprised by the question. "Travel." A few nearby passengers exchanged glances. Ethan felt heat rise behind his collar. The answer sounded almost sarcastic, even though her tone remained polite. "You know what I mean." Ava nodded. "I am attending an event." Ethan looked her over again. Something about the situation felt wrong to him, though he could not explain why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was bias disguised as instinct. Either way, he trusted it. "What event?" Ava paused briefly. "A military function." Ethan noticed the way she answered. Short, careful, controlled, as though she had spent years choosing words wisely. His radio crackled softly at his shoulder. A routine update from another officer. Nothing important. Yet when he looked back at Ava, he noticed something unexpected. Her phone had begun vibrating inside her jacket pocket. She glanced down. The screen illuminated briefly. For a fraction of a second, Ethan saw multiple missed calls. More than a dozen. Ava studied the display before pressing a button and silencing it. She did not answer. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and resumed waiting. Ethan frowned. "Important call?" Ava offered a faint smile. "Probably. You are not going to answer it?" Her eyes moved toward the station entrance where sunlight spilled across the floor in long golden rectangles. "Not right now." Ethan followed her gaze but saw nothing unusual. When he looked back, something about her calmness unsettled him. Most people became nervous when questioned. Most people tried to explain themselves. Ava Brooks simply stood there, patient and composed, as though she knew something he did not. Then his radio crackled again. And this time the voice on the other end sounded unexpectedly urgent. The urgency in the radio operator's voice immediately caught Ethan Carter's attention. "Officer Carter, status check." Ethan lifted the radio. "Everything is under control." A brief pause followed. "Copy that. Confirm your current location." Ethan frowned. Dispatch already knew his location. Every officer carried a tracking unit. Main station corridor near platform 8. Another. Pause. Longer this time. Understood. The transmission ended. Ethan lowered the radio slowly. Something about the exchange felt unusual. Across from him, Ava Brooks remained perfectly composed. Travelers continued flowing through the station around them, but more than a few had begun slowing down to watch. Public curiosity was almost impossible to avoid when uniforms and authority became involved. Ethan noticed several people pretending to check departure screens while clearly listening. Ava seemed completely unaffected by the attention. She adjusted her duffel bag and glanced toward the large station clock. The late afternoon sunlight had shifted, casting long shadows across the polished floor. "Are we finished?" she asked politely. Ethan shook his head. "Not yet." Her expression remained neutral. "All right." The calmness bothered him again. Most people became defensive after being questioned this long. Some became frustrated. Others became nervous. Ava did none of those things. She simply waited. Ethan studied her uniform more carefully. It looked authentic. Pressed perfectly. Every detail appeared correct. Yet something about that only increased his suspicion. High-profile military events often attracted impersonators and attention seekers. He had seen stranger situations before. "How long have you been in the military?" he asked. Ava considered the question. "A while." Ethan exhaled quietly. "Can you be more specific?" "Long enough to appreciate good questions." A few nearby travelers smiled. Ethan immediately noticed. He did not appreciate becoming the source of amusement. "This is a security matter, ma'am." "I understand." "Then help me understand why you are avoiding simple answers." Ava's eyes moved briefly toward a nearby window. Outside, a train slowly pulled into the station, sunlight reflecting from its silver exterior. "I am not avoiding anything," she said. "I am answering exactly what you ask." Ethan hated that she was technically right. Before he could continue, her phone vibrated again. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. She glanced down at the screen. This time Ethan caught a glimpse of multiple notifications appearing one after another. Ava silenced the device again without reading them. "That must be important." "Perhaps." "You still are not answering?" Ava smiled faintly. "The people calling know I am traveling." Ethan folded his arms. "That many people need to reach you?" "Apparently." The answer only deepened the mystery. Nearby, another station security officer walked past and slowed slightly after noticing the interaction. He looked at Ethan. "Everything good?" Ethan nodded. "Routine check." The officer glanced briefly at Ava and then continued walking. Yet Ethan noticed something interesting. The other officer had looked at her uniform and immediately moved on. No suspicion. No concern. Nothing. For a moment Ethan wondered if he was the only person seeing a problem. Then he dismissed the thought. Experience had taught him that instincts mattered. Ava shifted her duffel bag to her other shoulder. "Officer, my train departs in less than 30 minutes. And I would rather not miss it." Ethan looked directly at her. "You seem very confident that you belong here." For the first time, something changed in Ava's expression. Not anger. Not arrogance. Something closer to quiet amusement. "I know where I am supposed to be." The statement lingered between them. Before Ethan could respond, his radio crackled again. This time the voice sounded even more serious than before. "Officer Carter, do not leave your current location. A supervisor is requesting an update, and they specifically asked about the individual you are speaking with." Officer Ethan Carter stared at the radio clipped to his shoulder. A supervisor was asking specifically about the woman standing in front of him. That alone should have made him reconsider the situation. Instead, it reinforced his belief that something unusual was happening. Ava Brooks remained calm. The station continued buzzing around them with announcements, rolling luggage and conversations blending into a constant hum beneath the vaulted ceiling. Yet the space surrounding them felt strangely isolated, as though the rest of the world had moved a few steps farther away. Ethan pressed the radio button. "What kind of update does the supervisor need?" Static crackled briefly. "Just stay where you are. Someone will contact you shortly." The transmission ended. Ethan frowned. Nothing about the exchange made sense. He looked back at Ava. "Who exactly are you expecting to meet?" Ava adjusted her grip on the duffel bag. "People." Ethan sighed. "You keep doing that." "Doing what?" "Answering questions without actually answering them." Ava seemed to consider that. Perhaps you are asking the wrong questions. A few nearby travelers glanced toward them again. Ethan noticed and immediately felt irritation building beneath his professional composure. He had spent years trusting his judgment. Every instinct told him that there was more to this woman than she was admitting. The problem was that he could not identify what it was. Her phone vibrated once again. This time the screen illuminated long enough for Ethan to notice an incoming call marked only by a government exchange number. Ava looked at it for several seconds. Then she declined the call and slipped the phone away. Ethan blinked. Most people would answer, especially after receiving so many attempts to reach them. You keep ignoring those calls. Ava glanced toward the departure board. Yes. Why? A faint smile appeared. Because if it is truly important, they will find me. The answer lingered in Ethan's mind. It sounded absurd. Yet she delivered it with complete confidence. Before he could respond, a middle-aged station manager hurried through the corridor carrying a tablet. He slowed when he saw Ethan. Officer Carter. What is it? The manager lowered his voice. Operations received an inquiry about a passenger named Ava Brooks. Ethan's eyes narrowed immediately. From who? They did not say. Who is they? The manager hesitated. Federal office. That is all I know. Ethan felt a sudden shift in his stomach. Federal office. The words carried weight. Yet Ava remained completely unfazed. She looked neither surprised nor concerned. If anything, she seemed mildly embarrassed. The station manager glanced toward her. Ma'am, are you Ms. Brooks? Yes. Someone is trying very hard to locate you. Ava closed her eyes briefly as though she had expected that answer. I was afraid of that. Ethan immediately caught the phrase. Not surprised. Not confused. Afraid of that. The station manager looked equally puzzled. Should I connect the call? Ava shook her head. No, thank you. The manager looked stunned. Ethan felt exactly the same. Refusing a federal inquiry was not normal behavior. Yet somehow nobody challenged her decision. The manager simply nodded and walked away. Several seconds passed. Then Ethan's radio came alive again. This time it was not dispatch. It was his supervisor. The voice sounded unusually serious. Carter, run the name again. Ethan blinked. I already did. Run it again. Why? Silence followed. Then the supervisor answered quietly. Because the first result just disappeared from the system, and whatever replaced it has every department in the building asking questions. For the first time that afternoon, Officer Ethan Carter felt uncertainty creeping into his confidence. The station around him seemed louder than before. Announcements echoed from overhead speakers. A train horn sounded somewhere beyond the glass walls. Travelers continued moving through the terminal, yet his attention remained fixed on the woman standing calmly a few feet away. Ava Brooks did not appear concerned by the strange developments unfolding around her. She stood with the same quiet patience she had shown from the beginning. Ethan stepped aside and pulled out his department tablet. He entered her name again exactly as instructed. Ava Brooks. The search wheel spun briefly. Then new information appeared. Ethan frowned immediately. The screen looked different from before. Several sections had been restricted. Others displayed authorization notices he had never seen attached to a routine identity check. He refreshed the search. The same result appeared. His pulse quickened slightly. That is strange, he muttered. Ava glanced toward him but said nothing. Ethan opened another database. The result was identical. Restricted. Limited access. Authorization required. He looked up. Who exactly are you? Ava smiled faintly. You have already asked me that. And you have not really answered. She adjusted the cuff of her uniform. Perhaps there is a reason for that. Ethan stared at her. The answer should have sounded arrogant. Somehow it did not. Before he could respond, his supervisor appeared at the far end of the corridor. Sergeant Michael Reeves moved quickly through the crowd with an expression Ethan rarely saw. Concern. The sergeant approached and lowered his voice immediately. What happened? Ethan handed him the tablet. Reeves studied the screen. His eyes narrowed. Then he looked at Ava. Unlike Ethan, he did not speak right away. Instead, He seemed to evaluate the entire situation silently. "Ma'am," Reeves said politely, "have you been contacted today by anyone from the Department of Defense?" Ava exhaled softly. "Several times." Ethan noticed the sergeant's reaction. It was subtle, but it was there. Surprise. "And you declined the calls?" Reeves asked. Ava nodded. "I am on leave." The sergeant blinked. "That has not stopped them from trying." Ava offered a small smile. "No, it has not." Ethan looked between them. It felt as though everyone else possessed pieces of a puzzle he could not see. Nearby, a group of travelers slowed again. Word was spreading. People sensed something unusual was happening. 2 station employees stood near a coffee kiosk pretending not to watch. Even the security officer who had passed earlier returned and lingered near a support column. Reeves handed the tablet back to Ethan. "Do not escalate this any further." The instruction immediately bothered him. "Escalate what?" Reeves held his gaze. "Just let me handle it." Before Ethan could argue, Ava's phone vibrated once more. This time she looked at the screen longer than before. Her expression changed slightly. Not worry. Recognition. She finally answered. "Hello." Her voice remained calm. Ethan could only hear her side of the conversation. "Yes, I arrived." A pause. "No, there is no problem." Another pause. Ava glanced briefly toward Ethan and Reeves. "Just a misunderstanding." Several seconds passed. Then she listened quietly. Whatever was being said on the other end caused her to close her eyes and shake her head almost imperceptibly. "That really is not necessary," she said. She listened. Again. A small smile appeared. "Very well." The call ended. Ava slipped the phone back into her pocket. Reeves immediately spoke. "Who was that?" Ava looked toward the station entrance where sunlight continued pouring through the glass. Her answer was simple. "Someone who believes they are about to arrive before I can stop them." Officer Ethan Carter followed Ava Brooks's gaze toward the station entrance. For several seconds nothing happened. Travelers continued moving through the terminal. A child laughed somewhere near a newsstand. An announcement echoed overhead regarding a delayed departure. The moment felt almost ordinary again. Yet the expression on Sergeant Reeves's face suggested otherwise. He checked his phone. Then he checked it again. Whatever message he had received caused his posture to stiffen. Ethan noticed immediately. "What is it?" Reeves hesitated. "I am not sure yet." That answer did little to calm Ethan's growing frustration. Across from them, Ava remained remarkably composed. She looked like someone waiting for a train rather than standing at the center of an increasingly confusing situation. Her duffel bag rested beside her leg. The sunlight pouring through the glass walls had softened into a warm amber glow as evening slowly approached. Ethan folded his arms. "You knew this was going to happen, did you not?" Ava looked at him. "Which part?" "The calls. The inquiries. Whatever this is." Ava considered the question carefully. "I suspected people might become concerned when I did not answer." Ethan shook his head. "Concern does not usually involve federal offices contacting a train station." For the first time, Ava laughed softly. Not at him. Not mockingly. Simply with the quiet amusement of someone hearing a statement that happened to be true. Before either could continue, a black SUV rolled into view outside the station's main entrance. Then another. And another. Travelers near the windows immediately noticed. Conversations slowed. Heads turned. Even people rushing to catch trains paused long enough to look. The vehicles were not flashy. No sirens. No dramatic display. Yet something about their arrival commanded attention. Reeves checked his phone again and exhaled slowly. "Well," he muttered. "That was fast." Ethan looked at him. "What was fast?" Reeves did not answer immediately. Instead, he stared toward the entrance as the first SUV came to a stop. Several professionally dressed individuals stepped out. They moved with purpose but without urgency. Their presence alone changed the atmosphere. Ethan felt it instantly. Station employees noticed it too. Security personnel straightened their posture. Managers emerged from offices. Even the curious travelers seemed to sense that something significant was unfolding. Ava glanced toward the entrance and quietly closed her eyes for a moment. "I told them not to come." Ethan stared. You know them. Some of them. The answer only deepened the mystery. A few moments later, Ethan's radio crackled again. This time dispatch sounded unusually formal. Officer Carter. Go ahead. Remain professional and cooperate with arriving personnel. Ethan frowned. Arriving personnel from where? A brief pause followed. That information is above our level. The transmission ended. Ethan lowered the radio slowly. Above our level. He had never heard dispatch use those words before. Nearby, travelers had begun taking discreet steps backward, creating an open space around Ava without fully understanding why. The station itself seemed to be holding its breath. One of the suited individuals entered through the main doors and immediately scanned the terminal. His eyes moved across dozens of faces before settling on Ava Brooks. The moment he recognized her, his expression changed completely. Relief, respect, and something else Ethan could not quite identify. The man adjusted his pace and headed directly toward her. Not toward station management. Not toward security. Toward Ava. Ethan felt a chill move through him despite the warmth of the terminal, because for the first time since this encounter began, he realized the question was no longer whether Ava Brooks belonged there. The question was why so many important people seemed determined to find her before someone even more important arrived. The suited man crossed the terminal with the focused determination of someone who had spent the last hour trying to solve a problem that should never have existed. Travelers stepped aside without being asked. Station employees watched openly now. Even the background noise of the terminal seemed quieter as attention shifted toward the unfolding scene. When the man finally reached Ava Brooks, he stopped a respectful distance away and exhaled in visible relief. "Ma'am," he said. "There you are." Ava smiled apologetically. "I was never lost." The man shook his head. Half of Washington might disagree. Several people nearby exchanged confused looks. Ethan Carter felt his stomach tighten. The stranger was not speaking casually. He sounded genuinely concerned. Ava glanced toward the station clock. "I told everyone I was traveling. You also stopped answering your phone." "I was enjoying the silence." The man laughed softly despite himself. "You have created a remarkable amount of anxiety." Ethan noticed something important. The man addressed Ava with unmistakable respect. Not forced politeness. Not professional courtesy. Respect. The kind usually reserved for people whose authority was already understood. Sergeant Reeves stepped forward. "Sir, perhaps you could explain what is happening." The man turned politely. "Of course." He reached into his jacket and presented identification. Reeves studied it and immediately straightened. Ethan could not see the details, but he saw the reaction. Whatever credentials the man carried mattered. "My name is Daniel Mercer," the man said. "I work as a liaison for today's military event." Ethan spoke before he could stop himself. "Military event?" Mercer nodded. "A very important one." His eyes shifted briefly toward Ava. More important than most people realize. The answer only deepened the mystery. Around them, several more officials had entered the terminal. None approached directly. They simply waited near the entrance while keeping Ava within sight. Their patience seemed deliberate, as though they understood something Ethan did not. Ava picked up her duffel bag. "Daniel, this really was unnecessary." Mercer smiled. "With respect, ma'am, that opinion is not shared by anyone currently searching for you." Ava shook her head gently. "I am capable of boarding a train by myself. Nobody doubts that." Mercer paused. "That is not the issue." Ethan noticed Reeves watching the conversation carefully. The sergeant looked less concerned now and more curious. Meanwhile, Ava's phone vibrated once again. She glanced at the screen and sighed quietly. Mercer immediately recognized the expression. "Who is it this time?" Ava looked at him. "Guess." A brief smile crossed his face. "I would rather not." The call continued vibrating. Ava finally answered. "Hello." Her voice softened slightly. She listened for several seconds. Then she looked toward the station entrance where the remaining SUVs sat outside beneath the fading evening light. "No," she said. "You do not need to come inside." A pause followed. Ava closed her eyes. "That is exactly why I am asking you not to." More silence. Then she laughed quietly. Yes, I know you outranked me. The statement instantly captured Ethan's attention. Outranked me. Mercer lowered his eyes as though he already knew where the conversation was heading. Ava listened again before finally giving up. Very well, she said. I will be here. The call ended. For the first time all afternoon, a hint of resignation appeared in her expression. Mercer noticed it too. They are coming in, are they not? Ava nodded. Apparently. Ethan looked between them. Who is coming? Neither answered immediately. Instead, Mercer glanced toward the glass entrance doors just as another vehicle pulled up outside. The moment he saw who stepped out, even he stood a little straighter. The terminal seemed to pause as the newest arrival stepped from the vehicle outside. Nobody rushed. Nobody raised their voice. Yet the effect was immediate. Conversations softened. Station employees exchanged glances. Even travelers who had no idea what was happening sensed that someone important had just entered the building. Through the glass entrance doors, Ethan Carter watched a distinguished military officer walk inside accompanied by 2 aides. The officer carried himself with quiet authority. There was no dramatic display, no attempt to command attention. Respect followed him. Naturally, Daniel Mercer straightened his posture. Sergeant Reeves did the same. Ava Brooks, however, simply smiled and shook her head as if she had expected this outcome all along. I specifically asked him not to come, she said quietly. Mercer laughed under his breath. That was optimistic. The military officer crossed the terminal floor with measured steps. His eyes moved past the gathering crowd, past the station employees, past the security personnel. He appeared focused on only one person, Ava. Ethan felt a growing sense of confusion. Every new development seemed to deepen the mystery rather than explain it. The officer finally reached them and stopped. For a brief moment, the terminal became completely silent in Ethan's mind. He expected introductions, explanations, questions. Instead, the military officer smiled warmly. There you are. Ava sighed. Apparently everyone has decided I cannot travel alone. The officer chuckled. History suggests that when you disappear for a few hours, entire departments become nervous. Several people nearby smiled despite not fully understanding the conversation. Ethan noticed something remarkable. The military officer was speaking to Ava not as a superior addressing a subordinate. It felt more like professional equals sharing a familiar disagreement. I was trying to enjoy a quiet train ride, Ava said. And yet here we are. The officer glanced around the terminal before returning his attention to her. You ignored 17 calls. 18, Ava corrected. I ignored 18 calls. The officer laughed. Mercer covered his face briefly as though this was a recurring problem. Ethan looked toward Sergeant Reeves. The sergeant appeared just as puzzled as he felt. Finally Ethan stepped forward. Sir, if I may ask, who exactly is she? The question hung in the air. Several nearby travelers visibly leaned closer. The military officer studied Ethan for a moment. Not with hostility. Not with judgment. Simply with curiosity. Before he could answer, Ava spoke first. I think everyone has spent enough time discussing me today. Unfortunately, the officer replied. That option disappeared about an hour ago. Ava shook her head. The exchange felt strangely personal, almost friendly. Then the officer's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and immediately became serious. They are already here. Mercer blinked. Already? The officer nodded. Faster than expected. Ethan felt his pulse quicken again. Another arrival. Another layer to the mystery. Around them the crowd continued growing. Word had clearly spread through the station. Employees found reasons to remain nearby. Travelers delayed departures by a few extra minutes. Nobody wanted to miss whatever happened next. The military officer ended the call and looked directly at Ava. You are not going to like this. Ava folded her arms. That depends. A faint smile crossed his face. The person coming through those doors insisted on greeting you personally. For the first time all afternoon, Ava looked genuinely surprised. For a brief moment nobody spoke. Ava Brooks rarely looked surprised, yet the expression crossing her face now was unmistakable. The military officer noticed immediately and smiled. I thought that might get your attention. Ava shook her head slowly. He cannot possibly be coming here. That was my reaction too, the officer admitted. Unfortunately, reality did not ask for our opinion. Around them, the terminal remained wrapped in a strange mixture of curiosity and anticipation. Travelers who should have been boarding trains lingered near departure screens. Station employees found reasons to remain within sight. Even Officer Ethan Carter could feel the atmosphere shifting. Whatever was about to happen seemed larger than anything he had imagined when he first approached Ava earlier that afternoon. The military officer checked his watch. They are less than 5 minutes away. Ava exhaled quietly. This is becoming ridiculous. Daniel Mercer laughed. Respectfully, ma'am, that happened hours ago. Several nearby officials smiled. Ethan noticed something else. Every person who had arrived treated Ava with the same mixture of familiarity and admiration. Nobody acted surprised to see her. Nobody questioned her presence. The only person who had done that was him. The realization settled heavily in his chest. A station announcement echoed overhead, announcing a departure for Platform 8. Ava glanced toward the board. There goes my train. We will arrange another one, Mercer said immediately. Ava gave him a look. That is exactly the kind of answer I was hoping to avoid today. Before Mercer could respond, movement near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Another vehicle had arrived outside. Unlike the previous SUVs, this one was accompanied by additional security personnel. Nothing dramatic. Nothing excessive. Yet the reaction among the military officials was immediate. Conversations stopped. Postures straightened. Ethan saw the change ripple through the group like an invisible wave. The distinguished officer beside Ava adjusted his uniform jacket. Mercer quietly stepped aside. Even Sergeant Reeves seemed to recognize that something significant was approaching. The glass doors opened. Cool evening light spilled across the polished floor. Several people entered first, scanning the area with practiced professionalism. Then a senior military leader stepped into the terminal. Ethan did not recognize him immediately, but others clearly did. Respect seemed to follow the man wherever he moved. Travelers stepped aside instinctively. Employees lowered their voices. The entire station felt smaller somehow. Ava closed her eyes briefly. I cannot believe he actually came. The officer beside her smiled. Believe it. The senior leader crossed the terminal with calm confidence. Unlike everyone else, he did not stop to assess the situation. He did not speak with security. He did not acknowledge station management. His attention remained fixed on Ava from the moment he entered. Ethan watched carefully. He expected a formal greeting, a salute, something ceremonial. Instead, when the man finally reached her, his face broke into a warm smile. Colonel Brooks, he said, you have caused quite a day. The title landed like a thunderclap inside Ethan's mind. Colonel. For a second he wondered if he had misheard. Then he noticed the reaction around him. Nobody looked surprised. Not Mercer. Not the officials. Not the military officer standing beside her. Everyone already knew. Everyone except him. Ava offered an apologetic smile. That was never my intention, sir. The senior leader nodded. I know. His eyes moved briefly across the crowd before returning to her. But perhaps it is time everyone else understands exactly who they have been speaking to. The words seemed to freeze the entire terminal. Colonel Brooks. For several seconds nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The title hung in the air like the missing piece of a puzzle finally dropping into place. Officer Ethan Carter felt his thoughts stumble over themselves. He replayed every moment from the past hour. Every question. Every assumption. Every glance. And suddenly none of it looked the same anymore. Around them the gathered crowd reacted in waves. Some travelers exchanged surprised looks. Others quietly searched their phones. A station employee near the coffee kiosk covered his mouth in disbelief. The military officials showed no reaction at all. To them, this revelation was not news. It was simply reality finally catching up with everyone else. Ava Brooks shifted her duffel bag and offered an embarrassed smile. Sir, this is becoming much larger than it needed to be. The senior leader laughed softly. That depends on who you ask. His voice carried warmth rather than authority. He turned slightly toward the people gathered nearby. Most of us have been trying to locate Colonel Brooks for nearly 2 hours. A few people in the crowd laughed nervously. Ethan did not. His attention remained fixed on Ava. She looked exactly the same as she had an hour earlier. The same uniform. The same calm expression. The same quiet confidence. The only thing that had changed was his understanding of who she was. The senior leader continued. When someone with her responsibilities suddenly stops answering calls on the day of a major military event, people become concerned. Ava shook her head. Concerned is one word for it. Panic is another. Even she smiled at that. The crowd relaxed slightly. Yet the sense of importance surrounding her only seemed to grow. Ethan noticed that every official present deferred to Ava naturally. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody spoke over her. Nobody treated her as anything less than a respected leader. The realization made his earlier behavior feel heavier by the minute. Daniel Mercer stepped closer. Sir, perhaps everyone should understand why today's event matters. The senior leader nodded. Perhaps. He looked toward Ava first, silently asking permission. She sighed. You are all determined to make this uncomfortable for me. That is because you make humility very inconvenient, he replied. Several people smiled. Ethan noticed Ava glance toward the station floor for a moment. Despite everything happening around her, she still seemed more interested in avoiding attention than receiving it. The senior leader finally addressed the growing crowd. Colonel Brooks has spent more than 2 decades serving this country. She has led complex operations around the world, mentored generations of officers, and earned some of the highest professional recognitions available in military service. Silence followed. Even the travelers who knew nothing about military structure understood enough to recognize the significance of what they were hearing. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He remembered asking if she belonged in a restricted area. He remembered questioning her uniform. He remembered assuming she was someone she was not. Ava looked genuinely uncomfortable with the praise. Please stop. The senior leader smiled. Not a chance. More laughter spread through the terminal. Yet beneath the humor remained something deeper. Respect. Genuine respect. Then the senior leader reached into his jacket and removed a folded program from the military ceremony scheduled for that evening. He handed it to Ethan. Ethan accepted it automatically. When he opened it, his eyes immediately found the featured guest section near the center. There, printed clearly beneath the event title, was a photograph he instantly recognized. It was Ava Brooks. And beneath the photograph was a description that made his heart sink even further. Because the event everyone had been preparing for all week was not merely honoring military service. It was honoring her. Officer Ethan Carter stared at the program in his hands as though the printed words might somehow rearrange themselves into something easier to understand. They did not. The photograph was unmistakably Ava Brooks. The description beneath it outlined a career that stretched across decades of service, leadership, and achievement. Recognition after recognition filled the page. Commendations, strategic assignments, leadership roles, national honors. Ethan felt the weight of every assumption he had made pressing against his chest. Around him, the terminal remained unusually quiet. People who had gathered out of curiosity were now listening with genuine interest. The story had changed. What began as a routine encounter had become something entirely different. Ava glanced at the program and immediately looked away. I really wish people would stop reading those. The senior leader laughed softly. That is because you never liked being the center of attention. Attention is exhausting. Yet somehow it keeps finding you. A few people nearby smiled. Ethan noticed something remarkable. Despite everything that had been revealed, Ava's behavior had not changed at all. She was the same person who had stood patiently answering questions. The same person who had declined important calls because she wanted a quiet train ride. The same person who never once mentioned her accomplishments. It would have been easy to correct him at the beginning. One sentence could have ended the entire misunderstanding. Instead, she had remained calm, professional, respectful. The realization made Ethan feel even worse. Nearby, the station manager approached carrying a small tablet. Colonel Brooks, he said carefully, we would be honored to assist with any arrangements you need. Ava smiled warmly. Thank you, but I was perfectly happy 5 hours ago when nobody knew where I was. The station manager laughed. I suspect that option is no longer available. The senior leader nodded toward the program still resting in Ethan's hands. Tonight's ceremony was created to recognize a lifetime of service. Ava immediately shook her head. It was created to recognize a team. A team you led. That is not the same thing. Their exchange felt familiar, as though they had repeated versions of this conversation many times before. Ethan watched carefully. He had expected someone with such accomplishments to carry visible confidence, perhaps even pride. Instead, Ava seemed determined to redirect every compliment away from herself. Daniel Mercer stepped forward. Do you know what she argued about for 3 months? Several people looked at him curiously. Ava immediately narrowed her eyes. Daniel. She wanted her name removed from the event title. Laughter spread through the group. Even some travelers smiled. Ava covered part of her face with one hand. That is not relevant information. It absolutely is, Mercer replied. The senior leader nodded in agreement. You spent your entire career avoiding recognition. Ava shrugged. The work mattered more. The simple answer settled over the gathering. Ethan felt something shift inside him. Earlier that afternoon, he had looked at Ava and seen only what he expected to see. Now he realized how little he had actually observed. The dignity had always been there. The leadership had always been there. The character had always been there. He simply had not recognized it. Across the terminal, the evening sunlight continued fading beyond the glass walls, casting long golden reflections across the floor. The station seemed warmer now, calmer. Yet Ethan sensed the most difficult moment of the day had not arrived yet. Because for the first time since meeting Ava Brooks, he understood exactly how wrong he had been. The realization settled heavily over Officer Ethan Carter as the terminal continued moving around him. Trains arrived. Announcements echoed overhead. Travelers checked departure boards. Yet for Ethan, everything felt unusually still. He stood a few feet away from Ava Brooks and understood that the most important moment of the day was no longer about military honors, distinguished guests, or the ceremony waiting later that evening. It was about what happened next. Ava noticed him before he said a word. Somehow she always seemed to notice things others missed. The senior military leader was speaking quietly with Daniel Mercer nearby. Station employees had returned to their responsibilities. The crowd had begun, thinning as delayed travelers finally remembered they had places to be. The spectacle was ending. Reality was returning. Ethan took a slow breath and stepped forward. Colonel Brooks. Ava turned toward him. Yes, officer? Her tone remained exactly the same as it had been from the beginning. No bitterness. No triumph. No resentment. Somehow that made this harder. Ethan glanced briefly at the polished floor before meeting her eyes again. I owe you an apology. Nearby conversations continued. A train announcement echoed through the terminal. Yet Ethan barely heard any of it. Ava simply waited. When I first approached you, he continued, I made assumptions that I should not have made. I questioned you in ways I would have handled differently with someone else. I convinced myself I was following instinct when I was really following my own expectations. Ava listened quietly. Ethan swallowed. And I was wrong. Several seconds passed. The station seemed filled with soft evening light now, golden reflections stretching across the floor beneath the glass ceiling. Ethan had expected anger, perhaps disappointment. Instead, Ava's expression softened slightly. Officer Carter, she said gently, do you know how many people have made assumptions about me during my life? Ethan hesitated. Probably more than they should have. A faint smile appeared. That is a fair answer. Ethan nodded. Still, that does not excuse my behavior. Ava looked toward the large station windows for a moment. Outside, the last traces of daylight were beginning to fade. No, she said. But recognizing it matters. Ethan felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. Not disappear, but ease. Ava turned back toward him. The truth is, most people believe leadership looks a certain way. They expect a certain face, a certain age, a certain background. Ethan knew exactly what she meant. And when reality does not match the expectation, Ava smiled sadly. Some people adjust. Some do not. The words carried no accusation, only experience. Years of it. Ethan realized she was not speaking only about today. She was speaking about a lifetime. Nearby, the senior military leader glanced in their direction but deliberately remained where he was, giving them space. Ava noticed that too. He is pretending not to watch. Ethan almost laughed. I think everyone has been pretending not to watch. That finally earned a genuine smile. For the first time all afternoon, the conversation felt human rather than formal. No ranks. No authority. Just two people standing in a train station at the end of a long day. Ava adjusted the strap of her duffel bag. Officer Carter. Yes, ma'am. What matters now is not whether you were wrong earlier. Ethan looked at her carefully. What matters then? Her answer came without hesitation. What you choose to see the next time you meet someone before you know their story. The words stayed with Officer Ethan Carter long after Ava Brooks finished speaking. What you choose to see the next time you meet someone before you know their story. The sentence was simple, yet it carried more weight than any lecture he had ever received. Around them, the station was returning to normal. Travelers hurried toward departing trains. Families gathered their luggage. Employees resumed routines interrupted by the unexpected events of the afternoon. Life was moving forward again. Ava glanced toward the departure board. I suppose I should finally get where I was trying to go. Daniel Mercer immediately shook his head. Absolutely not. Ava sighed. Daniel, you missed the train. There will be another one. That is not the point. The senior military leader smiled as he listened. Clearly, this argument was familiar territory. I believe, he said, that transportation arrangements have already been made. Ava closed her eyes briefly. Of course they have. Several people nearby laughed. Ethan noticed that despite the respect surrounding her, Ava never behaved as though she expected special treatment. If anything, she seemed determined to avoid it. The station manager approached once more, carrying a small envelope. Colonel Brooks, this was delivered a few minutes ago. Ava accepted it with visible curiosity. Thank you. She opened the envelope and pulled out a handwritten note. Her expression softened immediately. The senior leader noticed. Good news. Ava nodded. Very. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her pocket. Ethan did not ask what it said. Somehow the moment felt personal. The evening sunlight had faded completely now, replaced by the cool glow of station lighting reflecting from polished floors and glass walls. The atmosphere felt quieter, warmer, as though the tension that had filled the terminal earlier had finally dissolved. The senior leader checked his watch. We should leave soon. Ava nodded. Then something unexpected happened. She turned toward Ethan once more. Officer Carter. He straightened automatically. Yes, ma'am. Ava reached into her duffel bag and removed a small challenge coin. The metal caught the station lights as she held it out. Ethan stared at it in confusion. I cannot accept that. Ava smiled. Actually, you can. He hesitated before carefully taking it. The coin was beautifully crafted, bearing military insignia on one side and a leadership motto on the other. Ethan looked up. Why are you giving me this? Ava considered the question for a moment. Because growth deserves recognition too. Ethan felt completely speechless. After everything that had happened, after every mistake he had made, she was offering kindness instead of resentment. The gesture landed harder than any criticism could have. Nearby, even Mercer seemed surprised. The senior leader simply smiled, as though this outcome did not surprise him at all. Ava adjusted her duffel bag one final time. People make mistakes, officer. Ethan nodded quietly. I know. What matters is what they learn from them. The station announcement system echoed another departure notice overhead. Somewhere nearby, a train began pulling away from a platform. The sound rolled through the building like a distant reminder that journeys continued whether people were ready or not. Ethan looked down at the challenge coin resting in his palm, then back at Ava Brooks. The misunderstanding that began the afternoon had become something neither of them expected. Not humiliation, not revenge, something better. Understanding. And as the group finally began moving toward the station exit together, Ethan realized that The person who had every reason to hold a grudge had instead chosen to leave him with a lesson he would probably remember for the rest of his life. The cool evening air greeted the group as they stepped out of the station. The glass doors closed softly behind them, sealing away the noise of departing trains and crowded platforms. For the first time all day, everything felt quiet. The line of waiting vehicles reflected the city lights beginning to glow across the street. Drivers stood nearby. Officials exchanged schedules and travel updates. Yet in the middle of all the activity, Ava Brooks seemed focused on something far simpler. She looked up at the darkening sky and smiled. "It is peaceful out here." Daniel Mercer laughed. "That is your conclusion after everything that happened today?" "It is still true." The senior military leader shook his head with amusement. "You remain the only person I know who can accidentally trigger a federal search effort and then spend the evening appreciating the weather." Ava shrugged. "Someone should." More laughter followed. The tension that had defined the day was finally gone. Officer Ethan Carter stood a short distance away holding the challenge coin she had given him. The metal felt heavier now than when she first placed it in his hand. Not because of its weight, because of what it represented. A lesson. A reminder. A responsibility. Ava noticed him watching and offered one final smile. It was the same calm smile she had worn when he first approached her hours earlier. The difference was that now he understood it. It was not confidence born from rank. It was confidence born from character. The senior leader glanced at his watch. "We really do need to leave." "I know," Ava replied. One of the aides opened a vehicle door. Mercer began gathering documents. The small group prepared to depart. Yet before entering the vehicle, Ava paused. She turned and looked back toward the station entrance. Through the glass walls, travelers continued moving beneath the bright lights. Some hurried. Some waited. Some carried stories nobody else could see. Ethan followed her gaze. "What are you looking at?" Ava thought for a moment before answering. "Possibility." Ethan frowned slightly. Ava smiled. Every person walking through those doors is carrying something nobody else knows about. A struggle. A dream. A responsibility. A history. Her eyes remained fixed on the crowd inside. Most of the time we never learn those stories. The words settled quietly into the evening air. Ethan looked down at the challenge coin once more. Then back at the station. For the first time, he found himself wondering about the people he usually passed without noticing. The people he thought he understood after only a glance. Ava finally stepped toward the waiting vehicle. The senior leader followed. Mercer closed a folder beneath his arm and smiled at Ethan. Then the doors opened. Ava paused one final time before getting inside. "Take care of yourself, Officer Carter." "You too, ma'am." She nodded. The vehicle door closed gently. Engines started. Headlights illuminated the pavement. One by one, the vehicles pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the evening traffic. Ethan remained standing there long after the last taillight vanished from sight. Around him, the city continued as normal. Cars passed. People walked by. The station carried on with its endless rhythm of arrivals and departures. Yet something had changed. Not in the city. Not in the station. In him. He slipped the challenge coin carefully into his pocket and looked back through the glass entrance one last time. Earlier that day he thought authority was something you could see. A title. A uniform. Position. Ava Brooks had taught him something different. True character did not announce itself. It did not demand recognition. It simply revealed itself through patience, dignity, and grace. And as Ethan turned and walked into the night, he realized that the most important person in the station that day had never needed anyone to know who she was. She only needed them to remember how to see.